Good evening, everyone. You're tuned in to WNYC Radio New York, and this is Andrea Mitchell bringing you tonight's coverage. I was planning to talk you through another calm August evening here in the city, but instead, we're faced with something I've never reported on before. At 7:46 p.m., just moments ago, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration issued an emergency broadcast warning of an imminent solar storm, unlike anything we've seen since September of 1859, the infamous Carrington Event. To put this plainly for everyone listening tonight, a massive solar flare erupted on the sun's surface about 18 hours ago, and its charged particles are now racing toward Earth at millions of miles per hour. NOAA is advising this could have devastating effects on our power grids, satellites, communication networks, essentially the technological backbone of modern society. I want to be clear. This is not just another routine warning. The original Carrington Event, back in the 19th century, disrupted telegraph lines across Europe and North America. Telegraph operators reported sparks leaping from their equipment, and auroras, the northern lights, were seen as far south as Cuba and Hawaii. If an event of similar or greater strength occurred today, scientists agree it could cripple our interconnected infrastructure worldwide. The potential consequences are severe, and authorities are not taking this lightly. Right now, the most immediate risk is damage to electrical grids, satellite systems, and communications networks. I'm seeing reports already starting to pour in, suggesting that disruptions may have begun across several regions globally. From what I have here, cities across Europe and Asia are experiencing the earliest signs of interference. Satellite communication disruptions have begun appearing over parts of Eastern Europe, Russia, and Japan. GPS signals are becoming unreliable across broad sections of Northern Asia, and several international airlines, including Lufthansa, Emirates, British Airways, Delta, and United, are scrambling to reroute or land their aircraft immediately. There's understandable concern about navigation systems and ground-to-air communications failing abruptly, and aviation authorities around the world are making fast decisions to get planes safely on the ground. Airports in Frankfurt, Munich, Heathrow in London, and Haneda in Tokyo are all halting outgoing flights to prevent potential mid-air emergencies. We're monitoring this closely, and I have reports just coming in from our own airports here in the New York metropolitan area. Both JFK and Newark Liberty airports have stopped all departing flights, and inbound flights are being expedited to land as quickly as possible. This is precautionary. No incidents have been reported yet, but officials are leaving nothing to chance. At this stage, it's better safe than sorry. I've just received an update from Mount Holly, New Jersey, from David Keller, an officer at the National Weather Service station. They're experiencing intermittent glitches in their weather radar and atmospheric monitoring equipment. David reports seeing instruments flickering and malfunctioning sporadically over the last 20 minutes, clear indicators that geomagnetic disturbances have begun to impact sensitive electronics here on Earth. He told us that in his 15 years at the Weather Service, he's never witnessed interference quite like this. At this moment, I'm being joined on the phone by Dr. Maya Patel, an astrophysicist and solar researcher from Columbia University's Astronomy Department. Dr. Patel, thank you for taking the time to talk with us under such urgent circumstances. Can you help our listeners better understand what exactly we should expect over the coming hours? Dr. Patel's voice is coming in a bit strained due to the disrupted connections, but here's what she's sharing with us. Andrea, what we're facing tonight is essentially an enormous burst of charged solar particles, a coronal mass ejection, that will strike Earth's magnetosphere with incredible force. Normally, Earth's magnetic field acts as a protective shield against such particles, but an event of this unprecedented magnitude can severely disrupt or even break through parts of that shield. In practical terms, we're looking at significant disruptions in electrical grids, radio signals, cell towers, and potentially catastrophic damage to satellite systems. This isn't theoretical. It's a scenario scientists have warned about for decades, and tonight it's becoming reality. Thank you, Dr. Patel. We appreciate your clear explanation. We'll be checking back in with you throughout the night. To everyone listening, local authorities and emergency management agencies have advised immediate actions you should take right now. They're recommending everyone to unplug non-essential electronics, things like computers, televisions, and microwaves, to reduce the risk of fire or equipment damage from voltage surges. Additionally, keep flashlights handy, stock up on bottled water, and make sure you have extra batteries and first aid supplies. City officials across the eastern seaboard are coordinating emergency response plans as we speak, but individual preparedness will be critical as public services become strained. While I relay this information, I'm also monitoring social media feeds and seeing incredible real-time accounts coming in. People as far south as Atlanta, Georgia, and Raleigh, North Carolina, report seeing vibrant auroras lighting up their skies, bright greens and deep purples clearly visible, an unprecedented phenomenon at these latitudes. These dazzling lights, usually confined to high northern latitudes, are clear signs of the solar radiation storm beginning to penetrate our atmosphere. It's eerily beautiful, but we must remember it signals something quite serious unfolding. My producer just handed me another update from Washington, D.C. Cellular networks, operated by major carriers such as Verizon and AT&T, are experiencing intermittent service interruptions across the metropolitan area. Callers report dropped connections, unstable data streams, and unusual static on their phones. Local emergency services are currently switching to backup radio systems, preparing for broader outages in communications. I now have confirmation from NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, in Colorado Springs. They've initiated protective measures to safeguard sensitive military communications, radar arrays, and strategic assets. Military installations across the continental United States are now operating on hardened communication systems designed specifically for electromagnetic pulse scenarios. NORAD emphasizes these are precautionary but essential steps to maintain national security and emergency response capabilities. As these reports continue to pour in, I urge everyone to take immediate steps for personal preparedness and safety. Reach out to your neighbors, friends, and family members, especially those who are elderly, medically fragile, or living alone. This will be a community-driven effort. Emergency services may soon become overwhelmed, and mutual support will become vital. Check your emergency supplies, secure your home, and stay calm. This is an unprecedented event, and we must navigate it carefully together. I'll be staying live with you here at WNYC Radio throughout the night, providing constant updates and relaying critical information as we receive it. Our station has backup generators and hardened communications, so we'll remain on air, even if broader power grids begin to fail. Please stay tuned to our frequency, and keep battery-powered or hand-crank radios nearby if possible, in case your primary power sources fail. Welcome back. This is Andrea Mitchell, live on WNYC Radio New York. It's now 8:27 p.m. Eastern Time, August 19th, and we're continuing our special broadcast covering tonight's unprecedented solar event, commonly known as the Carrington Event. Since our last update, the situation has escalated significantly. I want to start by saying clearly, if you're just tuning in, this is not a drill or a routine emergency warning. Scientists and authorities have confirmed we are in the early stages of one of the most severe solar storms ever recorded. I've just received another bulletin directly from NOAA's Space Weather Prediction Center in Boulder, Colorado. They are confirming that the coronal mass ejection, the CME we discussed earlier, has begun to collide with Earth's magnetic field within the past 20 minutes. This means we're now experiencing the leading edge of what could be a prolonged and highly damaging geomagnetic storm. Reports from around the globe are already describing serious disruptions. I have here urgent updates coming from our news desk. Major European cities are reporting widespread electrical failures. London's grid operator National Grid announced catastrophic surges in its distribution network, resulting in citywide power blackouts affecting approximately 70% of the metropolitan area. Emergency services are now responding to numerous calls regarding individuals trapped in subways, elevators, and other electrically dependent infrastructure. Similar scenarios are unfolding in Berlin, Madrid, and Paris, where emergency generators at hospitals and critical facilities have activated, but with growing concern over fuel reserves and the durability of backup power systems under sustained load. In Asia, Tokyo and Osaka are experiencing large-scale communication disruptions. Japanese broadcaster NHK has switched to emergency radio frequencies as television networks are losing signals from satellites damaged by incoming radiation. Cell phone networks have nearly collapsed across major cities there, severely limiting communication between authorities and the public. In Seoul, South Korea, reports describe widespread panic as the capital experiences repeated power outages and the public transportation system grinds to a halt. Authorities there are urging calm, but confusion and panic appear widespread. Bringing this closer to home now, listeners across North America, especially along the East Coast, are seeing unprecedented auroras, lighting up the night skies with spectacular intensity. Here in New York City, we're receiving multiple calls from residents describing these auroras illuminating the skyline. Reports of vibrant colors visible clearly above Times Square, Central Park, and even downtown Brooklyn. As fascinating as these sights may be, I must emphasize that these auroras are visual evidence of severe geomagnetic disturbances in our atmosphere, likely signaling imminent disruption to local electrical grids and communications networks. A moment ago, we received direct confirmation from Con Edison, 1EI, the power provider for New York City and Westchester County, 1EI, that their substations are beginning to register severe voltage fluctuations. Their operators are currently attempting controlled load shedding, strategically shutting down non-essential parts of the grid to protect transformers from permanent damage. They warn that residents may experience rolling blackouts or sustained outages very soon. Authorities strongly advise residents to minimize electricity use immediately, turn off lights, unplug non-essential appliances, and avoid using elevators until further notice. More troubling news from Washington, D.C. The Pentagon confirms they have temporarily lost satellite communication links with several military installations across Europe and Asia. While they report backup ground-based communication channels remain functional, strategic communications are clearly impaired, creating challenges in managing emergency response and global security operations. Military officials emphasize that defensive and emergency protocols remain fully active, and NORAD has secured all strategic nuclear command channels through hardened facilities designed specifically for electromagnetic pulse scenarios. They stress there is no immediate military threat, but acknowledge significant disruption to global coordination capabilities. I've just been informed of severe transportation disruptions now occurring across multiple regions of the United States. Air traffic controllers at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, PRIVE, the busiest airport in the country, TUASIS, report sudden radar and communication outages, leaving dozens of aircraft currently in holding patterns or being rapidly rerouted to nearby airports. Similar problems are unfolding at Chicago O'Hare, Dallas-Fort Worth, and Los Angeles International Airport. FAA officials have just declared a nationwide ground stop order for all air traffic, effective immediately, grounding thousands of flights in an unprecedented move aimed at preventing mid-air collisions and navigation failures. We've been advised by FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, to inform listeners nationwide to prepare immediately for extensive disruptions to critical infrastructure, including electrical grids, water supply systems, and emergency communications. FEMA stresses that households should fill containers with drinking water, secure additional food supplies, and prepare for possible isolation as communication services deteriorate further. Emergency services, hospitals, and law enforcement are being prioritized for emergency fuel and power, but capacities will be extremely limited given the scale and rapid progression of this solar storm. Listeners, I've covered events around the globe for nearly 20 years, but tonight is unlike anything I've experienced. Social media posts and emails continue pouring into our station, sharing chilling, first-hand accounts of blackouts and confusion spreading across cities everywhere. Families unable to reach each other as cell networks fail, elderly residents stuck alone in darkened apartments, and firefighters struggling with power-related emergencies, such as elevator rescues and electrical fires caused by overloaded transformers. Emergency medical personnel in Boston are reporting difficulties coordinating responses as communication channels degrade and ambulance dispatch systems malfunction intermittently. Boston General Hospital has activated full emergency protocols, switching to internal backup generators, but officials express serious concern about fuel and medical supply shortages if disruptions extend beyond a few days. I've just received confirmation that NORAD has elevated the National Defense Readiness Condition, or DEFCON, to Level 3, as a purely precautionary measure to maintain stability and order amid increasing communication disruptions. Authorities emphasize that there is no hostile action occurring, but due to rapidly diminishing communication capabilities and global uncertainty, this measure ensures maximum responsiveness by military and civilian defense agencies. Finally, another urgent update from NOAA's Boulder Center has just arrived. Scientists monitoring the solar event indicate the main wave of the storm is now fully interacting with Earth's magnetic field. Their instruments detect unusually high energy readings, significantly surpassing even initial forecasts. The full impact of this severe geomagnetic storm is still unfolding, and officials warn that the worst may still lie ahead over the next several hours. Listeners, we must brace ourselves for difficult and uncertain times ahead. If your household loses power or communications, remain calm, stay together, and conserve supplies. Limit unnecessary movements outside, as emergency services may become severely limited or unavailable. We're here with you tonight, and WNYC Radio will continue broadcasting throughout this crisis. Our studios are equipped with robust emergency generators and hardened radio equipment, allowing us to remain your voice of information even if broader grids fail. Please, stay safe and take immediate steps now to secure yourselves and your loved ones. I'll return shortly with additional updates and more critical information as we monitor tonight's unprecedented Carrington event. Thank you for staying with us here on WNYC Radio. This is Andrea Mitchell. It's now 9:16 p.m. Eastern Time, August 19th, and as I continue broadcasting, I want to provide you with an honest assessment of our current situation. In the past hour, the unprecedented solar storm that scientists warned us about, the Carrington event, has fully begun impacting Earth systems, causing widespread electrical failures, communication outages, and escalating chaos across multiple regions globally. Here in the New York metropolitan area, the situation continues to deteriorate rapidly. A moment ago, I received official word from Con Edison that they're now experiencing severe cascading failures across significant portions of New York City's electrical grid. This is beyond planned rolling blackouts or controlled shutdowns. Transformers throughout Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, and parts of the Bronx have suffered catastrophic damage from extreme voltage surges induced by the geomagnetic storm. Crews attempting repairs are encountering substantial difficulty, and restoration timelines are uncertain. The advice from Con Edison is clear. Be prepared for a prolonged period without power, potentially days or weeks. My colleagues have handed me a printed update, as we have lost direct internet access here at our studio. It appears this is now the case citywide. Internet service providers, including Verizon Fios, Spectrum, and Comcast, have reported critical failures in their fiber optic and cable infrastructure. Mobile networks have almost entirely collapsed, leaving millions across the city unable to communicate via phone or text. For those listening, battery-powered and hand-crank radios have become vital sources of information. If you can hear this broadcast, please conserve your radio batteries carefully. We will remain on air as long as our backup power supplies allow. Our generators at WNYC are functioning well at the moment, but we too have limited fuel reserves. This means at some point, our continuous coverage may face interruption. Looking globally, we've received deeply troubling reports. Europe remains plunged into darkness. London, Paris, Rome, and Berlin are reporting widespread civil disorders stemming from prolonged blackouts. In London specifically, emergency services report being overwhelmed by incidents of people trapped underground, apartment fires, and widespread panic in densely populated neighborhoods. Authorities are stretched thin, and there is serious concern about the city's capability to maintain order overnight. From Asia, particularly troubling news from Tokyo. Officials there report widespread fires triggered by transformer explosions, affecting densely populated districts such as Shinjuku and Shibuya. Fire brigades are struggling as water pumps, dependent on electricity, have failed, severely hindering firefighting efforts. Authorities in Tokyo have declared an unprecedented state of emergency, urging residents to evacuate burning areas on foot as transportation networks, including trains and subways, are completely disabled. Similarly, alarming situations are unfolding in Seoul, Hong Kong, and Shanghai, where infrastructure failures have led to chaos. Closer to home, several reports indicate widespread unrest is now developing in cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, Houston, and Atlanta, as local grids fail and communication breaks down. Emergency responders are reporting difficulties in coordinating response efforts, as conventional dispatch systems are now largely unusable. The Chicago Fire Department issued a desperate public statement via emergency frequencies, urging civilians to form community groups to assist neighbors and prioritize aid to vulnerable individuals. In Los Angeles, several hospitals, including Cedars-Sinai and UCLA Medical Center, report critical fuel shortages for generators, creating a potentially disastrous situation for thousands of patients dependent on medical equipment. I've also just been informed that nationwide ground stop orders remain fully enforced. Thousands of passengers are stranded at airports across the country, with no clear timeline for when air traffic will resume. At airports such as Dallas-Fort Worth, Orlando International, and Denver International, terminal lights and communication systems have begun failing, leaving travelers stranded in darkened terminals with limited support and dwindling supplies. Airport officials urge patience, but acknowledge their own capacity to provide relief is increasingly limited. The Pentagon has again raised concerns regarding strategic communications. They confirm significant disruptions to secure communication systems linking bases across the globe. Despite this, the U.S. military insists that national defense readiness remains robust, with redundant systems operational through hardened facilities, such as Cheyenne Mountain Complex in Colorado. Military units stationed domestically have now been activated nationwide to support local emergency operations, assist law enforcement, and help maintain public order amid increasing turmoil. Listeners, we're now also receiving very concerning updates from Canada and Mexico. In Toronto and Montreal, massive electrical grid failures mirror those here in the United States, with authorities urgently requesting assistance from unaffected regions. In Mexico City, prolonged outages have sparked widespread confusion and unrest, with the Mexican government mobilizing military units to help restore order. Reports from smaller communities in remote regions across North America suggest increasing isolation, as fuel, food, and medical supplies become rapidly scarce. As I relay this news, our studio here at WNYC has begun to feel increasingly isolated. The lights of Manhattan outside our windows are now dark, except for scattered fires visible from our vantage point. The auroras overhead, previously beautiful, now cast an unsettling glow across a city without electricity. Streets below us, normally bustling even at night, are filled with groups of residents cautiously moving through the darkness, searching for supplies, or attempting to find help for those in need. Police cars and fire trucks occasionally pass by, but with diminishing frequency. We've received official communication from Mayor Eric Adams, transmitted via emergency radio frequencies from the city's Office of Emergency Management. The mayor urges New Yorkers to remain calm, stay in their homes if possible, and form neighborhood-level emergency groups to help one another. Emergency services remain active, but resources are overwhelmed. The mayor emphasizes community support will be critical in the hours and days ahead. On a more personal note, I've covered disasters, emergencies, and international crises for most of my career. But tonight feels different. There is a profound sense of uncertainty about what comes next. Many of us have imagined a scenario like this but hope never to experience it. It's clear now that this event will leave lasting marks on our world, and recovery will not be quick or easy. If you're hearing my voice right now, take a moment to ensure your immediate surroundings are secure. Check your supplies carefully. Drink water sparingly, preserve batteries, keep your radio operational, and most importantly, remain calm. Panic serves no purpose. Our community, our humanity, will be tested tonight and in the days to come. We'll stay live here at WNYC as long as our resources hold out. Our broadcast team is working around the clock to verify information and bring you accurate updates. I promise you, as long as we can transmit, we will remain your voice through this crisis. You're still listening to WNYC Radio New York, and this is Andrea Mitchell continuing our live coverage as the catastrophic Carrington event unfolds. It's now 10:04 p.m., August 19th, and the situation across the United States and the world has become increasingly dire. As night deepens, widespread power outages and communication failures have plunged major urban centers into darkness, and we are now seeing clear signs that emergency systems are severely overwhelmed. Since my last update, several urgent developments have occurred. First, here in New York City, the situation has deteriorated significantly. Fires caused by transformer explosions and electrical overloads have spread in several neighborhoods, particularly in densely populated sections of Brooklyn and the Bronx. Firefighters are struggling to contain these blazes because water pumping stations and hydrant systems are compromised by electrical outages. The fire commissioner issued an urgent radio message asking residents to evacuate immediately from burning areas and to seek safety in open spaces or designated emergency shelters, if reachable. The New York Police Department has mobilized all available officers to maintain order, but they too face severe communication challenges. With conventional dispatch systems offline, police are utilizing portable analog radios and establishing makeshift command centers in various neighborhoods. The NYPD commissioner issued a statement urging residents to stay indoors, secure their residences, and avoid unnecessary travel, as streets have become hazardous due to limited lighting, stalled vehicles, and increasing panic among residents seeking supplies or assistance. At city hospitals, especially Bellevue, Mount Sinai, and NYU Langone, emergency conditions have become critical. Backup generators initially provided temporary relief, but the intense geomagnetic storm has rendered some fuel pumps and battery backup systems ineffective. Hospital administrators report they now face potentially catastrophic failures of life support equipment. Doctors, nurses, and emergency personnel are working tirelessly under difficult conditions, utilizing flashlights and manual procedures to care for patients. However, medical supplies and fuel reserves are dwindling rapidly, and there are mounting concerns about the continued care of critically ill patients. Elsewhere in the United States, cities are grappling with parallel crises. Chicago has issued a citywide emergency declaration, as large portions of the metropolitan area are experiencing extended blackouts and civil disorder. Reports describe looting in the Loop and along Michigan Avenue, as police struggle to maintain order amid a near-total collapse of communication. Similar unrest is occurring in Philadelphia, Miami, and Los Angeles, where large-scale power failures and isolation have contributed to increasing panic among citizens. Authorities across these cities strongly encourage communities to remain calm and rely on neighborhood support networks. In Washington, D.C., authorities have implemented stringent security measures to protect key government facilities, including the White House, Capitol Building, Pentagon, and Supreme Court. Federal emergency management operations are now being coordinated from hardened locations, such as Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center in Virginia and Raven Rock Mountain Complex in Pennsylvania. Government radio broadcasts emphasize that continuity of government plans are active, though communications remain severely impaired nationwide. Residents in the capital have been advised to shelter in place, conserve resources, and await further instruction. The Pentagon also confirmed that military installations across the United States have activated their highest state of readiness under emergency protocols designed specifically for electromagnetic pulse scenarios. Troops from Fort Bragg, Fort Hood, Joint Base Lewis McChord, and other key facilities have deployed into nearby communities to assist in maintaining order, distributing emergency supplies, and providing medical support where possible. Despite widespread communication outages, military command centers are maintaining limited coordination through hardened radio and satellite communication channels specifically designed for scenarios like tonight's event. Reports from Canada confirm catastrophic failures in Toronto, Vancouver, Ottawa, and Montreal, similar to those seen in major American cities. Canadian military units are mobilizing nationwide to maintain public order and assist emergency services. Likewise, the Mexican government has mobilized its armed forces and National Guard units to stabilize Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey, as prolonged outages trigger increasing unrest and shortages of basic necessities. Internationally, reports coming in through intermittent shortwave radio signals paint an increasingly grim picture. Across Europe, major cities including London, Madrid, Paris, Berlin, and Rome remain largely without power, with emergency services completely overwhelmed. Hospitals in these cities report severe medical supply shortages and fuel depletion, forcing healthcare providers to make increasingly desperate decisions about patient care. Fires caused by transformer explosions and overloaded electrical systems have become widespread, especially in densely populated urban centers where emergency response capacities are exhausted. In Asia, we've learned that Tokyo and Osaka are now experiencing catastrophic fires, spreading rapidly throughout multiple districts. Authorities in Japan have declared a national emergency, urgently requesting international assistance. Similar dire situations exist in Seoul, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Mumbai, where power grids remain completely offline, communications crippled, and widespread civil unrest escalating. Without electricity to support essential infrastructure, these densely populated cities face an increasingly dire humanitarian crisis. Returning here to our situation at WNYC Radio, I must share with you that our generators have begun to run low on fuel. While our engineers have worked diligently to conserve energy, maintaining continuous broadcast coverage has significantly drained our supplies. We anticipate, realistically, only a few more hours of uninterrupted transmission remaining. Once fuel reserves are exhausted, our station will unfortunately go dark, along with much of the city. I've covered many crises, disasters, and emergencies over the years, but never anything like this. I can see fires in the distance from our studio window, casting an unsettling glow over the skyline. A skyline I barely recognize without its iconic illuminated landmarks. Occasional sirens still pierce the darkness, but they're becoming fewer as emergency services struggle to respond. I know that many listeners feel isolated, frightened, and uncertain about the future. I want to reassure you. We share those feelings, but our commitment to keep providing accurate information remains absolute. Please continue to conserve water, food, and essential resources. Reach out to neighbors, particularly the elderly, children, and those with special medical needs. The strength of community bonds we build now will determine our resilience moving forward. Remember, even as infrastructure collapses around us, human kindness, cooperation, and mutual aid remain the strongest tools we have to get through this crisis. My team and I will keep broadcasting as long as physically possible. Until our generators run out of fuel, we'll remain your voice through this event. As the night continues, please stay safe, stay calm, and hold tight to those around you. I'll be back shortly with more updates and additional information as we continue monitoring tonight's unprecedented solar catastrophe. The current time is 11:06 p.m., August 19th, and we continue our broadcast as we document the catastrophic impacts of the Carrington-level solar storm gripping the world tonight. I want to provide as clear and comprehensive an update as possible, even as our own resources become strained and communications increasingly fragile. At this moment, here in New York City, conditions are severely deteriorating. Large portions of the city remain in total darkness, illuminated only by fires burning uncontrolled in neighborhoods stretching from Lower Manhattan to the Bronx. Emergency services, firefighters, police, and medical responders and continue their efforts, but their effectiveness is severely limited due to communication failures and inadequate resources. Without functioning hydrants or dependable power sources, firefighting has devolved into an exhausting battle, relying primarily on manual equipment and sheer human determination. Just minutes ago, we received a transmitted message from New York City's Office of Emergency Management. The mayor has ordered the establishment of emergency shelters and gathering points across the city, specifically in large open areas such as Central Park, Prospect Park in Brooklyn, and Van Cortlandt Park in the Bronx. Citizens who are trapped in unsafe conditions, or whose homes have become uninhabitable due to fires or structural damage, are encouraged to make their way carefully to these shelters, if at all possible. It is important to emphasize, these locations may offer only minimal supplies or temporary safety. However, they represent our best immediate option under these unprecedented circumstances. We continue to receive alarming reports from hospitals throughout the metropolitan area. Bellevue Hospital has activated its most critical emergency protocol, diverting all remaining fuel and resources exclusively to life support systems. Medical personnel have informed us, via shortwave radio transmission, that without additional supplies or restoration of power, many critically ill patients risk catastrophic outcomes in mere hours. Similar scenarios are playing out across Mount Sinai, New York Presbyterian, and other major medical facilities citywide. The tireless work of healthcare providers continues under increasingly difficult conditions, illuminated only by flashlights and portable lanterns, as electrical backup systems fail and fuel reserves approach depletion. Our station has been receiving sporadic shortwave radio transmissions from other major American cities. In Chicago, local authorities have reported a significant deterioration in civil order. Emergency services there have described incidents of unrest and looting spreading rapidly across the city center and residential districts, exacerbated by the loss of all street lighting and traffic control systems. Police and National Guard units are mobilizing to establish basic control, but they remain severely hindered by communication outages and lack of clear directives. Similarly, troubling situations have been reported in Philadelphia, Detroit, Houston, and Los Angeles, where civil disturbances have become widespread as residents desperately seek access to dwindling supplies of food, water, and medical resources. I've also just received updates transmitted from Atlanta, where emergency management officials describe escalating challenges at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, now completely without power. Thousands of stranded passengers have grown increasingly restless as airport personnel struggle to provide even basic amenities such as food, water, and sanitation. Authorities there have urgently requested National Guard support, but communication breakdowns mean response times are severely delayed or entirely absent. A similar crisis is unfolding at major airports nationwide, leaving tens of thousands stranded, isolated, and vulnerable. Turning again to our nation's capital, a recent shortwave transmission from federal emergency authorities confirms they are continuing to operate critical functions from hardened government installations such as Mount Weather and Raven Rock. They reiterate that federal continuity of government plans remain active, but acknowledge severe limitations in providing aid to state and local governments. The Pentagon has issued another statement, confirming that DEFCON remains at Level 3, an elevated state of military readiness, due entirely to precautionary measures amidst global communications disruptions. They again emphasize there is no direct military threat at this moment. The current crisis is strictly related to the solar storm's impacts on global technological systems. Internationally, the picture continues to worsen significantly. We received brief transmissions from amateur shortwave operators based in Europe, reporting that cities such as London, Paris, Madrid, and Rome remain in total darkness, with widespread fires causing devastating damage. Local emergency response capacity is virtually exhausted, leading citizens to rely increasingly on improvised measures and community-driven efforts. Reports from Berlin indicate fires now threaten key government and historic buildings, with firefighters unable to adequately respond due to failures of water pumping systems and electricity-dependent infrastructure. Disturbingly, brief messages relayed from Asia suggest conditions have rapidly declined to catastrophic levels in major cities, including Tokyo, Seoul, Shanghai, and Mumbai. Officials in Japan report uncontrolled fires devastating large urban areas, leaving hundreds of thousands homeless. With transportation infrastructure entirely disabled, residents attempting to evacuate find themselves trapped by the rapidly spreading infernos. Reports describe scenes of unprecedented human suffering, worsened by a near-total absence of organized emergency response. Additionally, authorities in Seoul and Busan report similar scenarios of widespread devastation and escalating humanitarian crises. Hospitals in these cities lack sufficient power, medical supplies, and clean water, further exacerbating the suffering of millions of residents. The South Korean government has issued urgent appeals internationally for emergency assistance, though realistically, responses are severely hindered due to the global nature of this crisis. Here in our studio at WNYC, we can see through our windows a city profoundly changed. Fires cast an eerie glow over a Manhattan skyline that just hours ago stood brightly lit and vibrant. Streets below our building remain largely deserted, punctuated only by occasional emergency vehicles struggling to navigate without functioning traffic lights. Groups of citizens, carrying flashlights and makeshift lanterns, move cautiously, seeking safety or supplies amid the darkness. Our own broadcast capabilities continue only through the extraordinary efforts of our engineers, who are now manually adjusting generators to extend our available fuel as long as possible. Unfortunately, we must acknowledge that our fuel supply is critically low, and we anticipate having only limited time remaining for continuous broadcasting. We assure our listeners that we will remain live as long as physically possible, providing reliable information in a situation marked increasingly by uncertainty and isolation. If you are listening, I urge you once again to conserve your resources carefully. If safe and possible, seek out community support and assist those around you who may be vulnerable or isolated. Together, as neighbors and communities, we will be stronger in facing the coming challenges. In my many years of reporting, I've never experienced an event of this magnitude and global reach. Tonight tests our collective resilience in ways we could scarcely have imagined. Yet, in this darkness, our shared humanity and community bonds remain our most vital resources. You're tuned in to WNYC Radio New York, and this is Andrea Mitchell continuing live coverage as we enter midnight, now officially August 20th. The situation remains profoundly serious, as the catastrophic effects of tonight's unprecedented solar event, the Carrington-level storm, have intensified dramatically in the last few hours. My team and I are still broadcasting from our studio here in Lower Manhattan, though as we've noted previously, our own resources are rapidly diminishing. I must begin with an honest update about the conditions in New York City. Widespread fires have spread unchecked across numerous boroughs. The FDNY has publicly stated via emergency shortwave frequencies that their firefighting capacities are critically limited, due primarily to electrical failures affecting water pumping stations and critical infrastructure. Crews have shifted to utilizing portable water tanks, manual pumps, and limited tank trucks. But despite their tireless efforts, fires continue spreading into densely populated residential areas. Brooklyn neighborhoods such as Williamsburg, Bushwick, and Crown Heights are reporting significant damage, with thousands of residents displaced and seeking safety wherever they can. Additionally, we've received scattered shortwave transmissions, indicating that large sections of Queens and the Bronx face similar devastation. Astoria and Long Island City residents report massive fires ignited by transformer explosions and electrical surges that ignited buildings, vehicles, and fuel depots. Community volunteers and makeshift response teams are bravely attempting to fight these fires manually, often using buckets, hoses, and improvised equipment. They desperately need additional support, but communications and transport systems remain severely compromised, making effective coordination nearly impossible. Hospitals citywide remain critically affected. Bellevue and Mount Sinai continue struggling to keep essential systems running, but fuel supplies powering backup generators are nearly exhausted. Medical personnel have transmitted urgent requests via shortwave radio for external aid, particularly fuel, batteries, medical supplies, and clean water. Tragically, some hospitals have reportedly been forced to make heartbreaking decisions regarding the allocation of dwindling resources to patients as available equipment becomes scarce or non-functional. The dedication and bravery of medical workers remain beyond question, but the situation they face is dire and rapidly deteriorating. We've also received alarming updates from our news desk, relayed by portable amateur shortwave radios operated by local volunteers. A significant humanitarian crisis is unfolding at major airports such as JFK International, Newark Liberty, and LaGuardia. Thousands of travelers remain stranded without power, food, clean water, or functioning sanitation systems. Airport personnel report increasing unrest as panic and frustration rise among stranded passengers who have limited information and face indefinite waits. Authorities have appealed urgently for outside assistance, including the National Guard, but their own communications remain sporadic and response capabilities are deeply limited. Looking beyond New York, the picture remains equally troubling nationwide. A recent transmission from the Chicago Emergency Management Agency confirms severe civil unrest and widespread infrastructure collapse throughout the metropolitan area. Hospitals there are experiencing the same devastating shortages as New York, with medical personnel increasingly relying on manual care. Authorities have issued urgent pleas for community groups and volunteers to assist wherever possible, providing food, water, medical support, and general safety measures in the absence of coordinated governmental responses. Similar crises have developed in major urban centers like Detroit, Houston, Miami, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. Reports from these cities describe widespread panic, severe shortages of essential supplies, and rapidly deteriorating civil order as darkness, fires, and lack of effective communication take their toll on public morale. Emergency responders nationwide, despite their best efforts, remain overwhelmed and severely hindered by lack of reliable equipment, communications, fuel, and coordination. Federal government operations continue from secure emergency facilities, but they openly acknowledge their ability to coordinate and manage this unprecedented nationwide crisis remains severely limited. Brief updates relayed via shortwave radio from Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center stress citizens must rely on local communities for immediate support, as federal relief efforts face significant logistical and technological barriers. They continue urging calm, cooperation, and conservation of vital resources as we navigate this unfolding disaster together. Turning to international updates, transmissions continue to indicate catastrophic devastation across major global cities. London, Paris, Madrid, Rome, and Berlin remain engulfed in widespread fires, triggered by electrical failures, with almost total breakdowns of emergency services. European governments are attempting to operate from hardened facilities, but public safety and humanitarian conditions deteriorate rapidly without functioning infrastructure. Shortwave operators report significant displacement of populations seeking safety outside urban areas, yet conditions in rural regions also face severe challenges regarding supply shortages and isolation. Disturbingly, recent transmissions from Asia confirm truly catastrophic humanitarian crises. Tokyo is suffering uncontrolled fires, consuming large sections of the city, leaving countless displaced. Similar devastation is reported in Osaka, Seoul, Hong Kong, Mumbai, and Singapore. Officials in these cities have desperately requested international assistance, but realistic prospects of coordinated relief remain uncertain given the global scale and severity of the crisis. Millions of residents in densely populated Asian cities currently face unimaginable conditions, without power, water, food, medical care, or shelter. Here in our own studio, our capacity to maintain this broadcast is rapidly reaching its end. Fuel levels in our generators are critically low, forcing us to reduce our operational demands severely. My dedicated team, along with our engineers, have diligently worked to keep transmissions going, but we recognize that soon we will lose the ability to broadcast continuously. As I look out over Manhattan tonight, I find it hard to reconcile the city I see now with the vibrant metropolis it was just yesterday. Fires illuminate buildings in a grim, flickering glow. Streets remain mostly deserted, filled only occasionally by groups of citizens cautiously moving in search of safety or supplies. Sirens have become rare, and even emergency vehicle movements appear limited. The eerie silence is broken intermittently by distant shouting, voices raised in confusion, fear, or calls for assistance. To those listening now, I urge you again to carefully conserve your resources, check regularly on neighbors, and remain calm. Rely on your community networks. If you can safely assist someone in need, especially elderly neighbors, children, or medically vulnerable individuals, please do so carefully and compassionately. These acts of kindness and support remain essential to surviving the challenges we now face. This broadcast has been one of the most difficult in my career. Throughout tonight, my colleagues and I have worked diligently to provide accurate, timely information in hopes of supporting your safety and well-being during this extraordinary crisis. Our commitment remains unchanged. As long as we can transmit, we will continue to do so. Please continue monitoring our broadcasts. Keep your battery-powered or hand-crank radios ready, and stay vigilant. I'll return shortly with further updates as we approach the final stages of our station's operational capacity. Thank you for staying with us at WNYC Radio New York. This is Andrea Mitchell, and the time is now 12:47 a.m., August 20th. As we move deeper into the night, the scale and severity of tonight's catastrophic solar event continue to overwhelm every corner of the globe. I will continue providing updates as clearly as possible, although our ability to gather and relay information grows increasingly limited with each passing moment. Since our last update, conditions here in New York City have reached critical levels. Fires burning unchecked in multiple boroughs now threaten major portions of Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and significant parts of Lower Manhattan. Volunteer and emergency crews report being nearly powerless in stopping the spread, largely because electrical outages have completely disabled water pumping infrastructure. We continue receiving sporadic shortwave transmissions from emergency response groups operating throughout the city, all echoing the same urgent message. Without rapid support, entire neighborhoods risk being lost overnight. I've just received another message from Bellevue Hospital, where staff have confirmed via shortwave radio that their backup power systems have completely failed. Medical staff at Bellevue are now forced to manually operate critical equipment, providing essential care by flashlight. They are running low on critical supplies, such as oxygen tanks, insulin, and intravenous medications, and they urgently need help from surrounding communities. Similar heartbreaking reports are arriving from hospitals citywide. Mount Sinai, Lenox Hill, and New York Presbyterian have all described equally dire conditions. Doctors and nurses continue tirelessly caring for patients, but it is becoming tragically clear their options are severely limited. Transportation infrastructure remains entirely incapacitated throughout the metropolitan area. JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark airports remain without electricity, leaving thousands stranded and increasingly desperate. The Port Authority has sent urgent shortwave appeals for immediate humanitarian aid, but responses have been slow or non-existent due to communication failures and widespread isolation. Subway tunnels, bridges, and roadways remain darkened, crowded with stalled vehicles and frightened residents attempting to reach safety on foot. Across the United States, we have received brief, shortwave radio updates, revealing severe deterioration in major cities. Chicago continues experiencing widespread civil disorder. Law enforcement and National Guard units struggle to restore basic order. Hospitals throughout Chicago face catastrophic shortages of medical supplies and power, with medical professionals forced into unimaginable scenarios of patient prioritization. Reports from Philadelphia, Boston, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C. reflect similar crises unfolding, with local authorities unable to effectively coordinate emergency responses amid widespread infrastructure collapse. We have also just received urgent shortwave transmissions relayed from Atlanta, where Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport remains a major humanitarian emergency. Thousands remain trapped without sufficient food, water, or sanitation. With no effective communications or transportation options available, the conditions inside the terminals have become increasingly chaotic, and airport officials urgently request external assistance. A similar situation is reported at major airports nationwide, including Dallas-Fort Worth, Miami, Los Angeles, and Denver. Turning to international conditions, the picture grows more distressing with every update. European cities remain dark and burning, with brief transmissions indicating fires devastating urban areas of London, Berlin, Madrid, Rome, and Paris. Without functioning infrastructure, firefighting efforts have ceased entirely in some districts, leaving residents to fend for themselves. Shortwave radio operators in Europe report desperate scenes, with residents attempting to escape burning city centers, overwhelming already limited emergency shelters, and confronting shortages of food, water, medicine, and other essentials. From Asia, increasingly dire reports describe catastrophic devastation across densely populated cities. Tokyo has become largely inaccessible due to uncontrolled fires engulfing entire neighborhoods, forcing millions of residents to flee into surrounding areas on foot. Similar scenes are reported from Osaka, Seoul, Hong Kong, and Mumbai, where emergency services have become virtually non-existent. Hospitals in these cities report critically low medical supplies, no power, no clean water, and virtually no organized external assistance available. Authorities from South Korea and Japan have attempted desperate international pleas for humanitarian aid, but realistically, organized relief remains improbable given the global scale of this crisis. In Mexico City, conditions have also reached crisis levels, with widespread power failures, prompting civil unrest and escalating shortages of critical resources. Mexican government emergency transmissions indicate National Guard and Army units have deployed in major cities nationwide to restore order, provide essential aid, and manage deteriorating humanitarian conditions. Canadian cities such as Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver continue facing catastrophic disruptions, with authorities similarly struggling to coordinate effective emergency responses amidst infrastructure failures and shortages of supplies. Returning to our own conditions here at WNYC Radio, our station faces imminent cessation of broadcasts. Our emergency generators, which have provided power for our transmission equipment throughout this crisis, are nearly depleted of fuel. Despite extraordinary efforts from our engineering and technical teams to extend our broadcasting capacity, our continuous transmissions will soon be forced offline. We anticipate that within the next few hours, WNYC will become unable to continue live broadcasts, leaving our listeners reliant solely on shortwave radio transmissions from scattered amateur operators, emergency agencies, or other surviving broadcast stations elsewhere. As I glance out our studio windows here in Lower Manhattan, the once familiar city skyline is barely recognizable. Firelight flickers ominously across buildings, casting a surreal and unsettling glow. Streets remain predominantly deserted, with only occasional groups moving cautiously in search of safety, supplies, or shelter. Even the sirens, previously persistent in their urgent calls, have largely fallen silent, replaced by distant sounds of shouting, cries for help, or isolated sounds of shattering glass as unrest spreads unchecked. To everyone who can hear this transmission, I implore you once again to prioritize your safety and the safety of your loved ones. If possible, remain inside and avoid unnecessary movement. Conserve water, food, medical supplies, and battery power carefully. Stay calm and rational in your decisions, and continue checking on neighbors, particularly elderly or medically vulnerable individuals. Remember, our collective resilience, mutual aid, and cooperation are critical during this unprecedented crisis. I must express my sincere gratitude for those who have tirelessly worked alongside me tonight. Our engineers, technical team, producers, researchers, and other staff, each doing their utmost to keep our listeners informed and connected during this catastrophe. Though this night challenges all of us in ways we scarcely imagined possible, our strength remains in our shared humanity, our community spirit, and our willingness to support one another. As long as our generators continue to function, we pledge to maintain these broadcasts. Even if our station falls silent soon, we will remain committed to returning on air the moment it becomes possible. Until then, please continue monitoring any remaining emergency broadcasts, amateur shortwave transmissions, or other available sources for updated information. Our coverage of tonight's devastating Carrington event continues, though, as I've previously indicated, our broadcasting capability grows increasingly limited. With our generators nearly depleted, we expect the station may soon go offline. Until then, we remain committed to keeping you informed with whatever updates we can still access. I want to begin by addressing the immediate local situation in New York City. The fires reported earlier tonight continue burning unchecked across large areas of Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx. Emergency services personnel, firefighters, paramedics, police officers continue responding heroically, though their effectiveness is severely constrained by a lack of equipment, communication, and power. Volunteer groups have emerged in several neighborhoods, attempting to provide basic aid, shelter, and firefighting assistance, using improvised methods and equipment. We received a recent shortwave transmission from community volunteers in Bushwick, Brooklyn, urgently requesting more volunteers and resources as fires threaten residential buildings, apartment complexes, and small businesses. From Manhattan, we have alarming reports that Lower Manhattan, particularly the financial district, Tribeca, and parts of Chinatown, have experienced widespread fires ignited by electrical surges. Emergency responders have struggled to access these densely populated areas due to blocked streets and failed traffic lights. Residents unable to evacuate remain isolated and vulnerable, seeking shelter in open spaces like Battery Park and South Street Seaport. Reports also indicate a severe crisis at hospitals such as New York Presbyterian Lower Manhattan, where backup generators have failed entirely, forcing medical teams into extraordinarily difficult conditions. In Queens, volunteer groups from Astoria and Long Island City transmitted urgent shortwave messages reporting massive fires, shortages of potable water, and medical emergencies that exceed available community resources. Citizens there have taken refuge in parks and open spaces, constructing makeshift shelters and field hospitals to support their neighbors in crisis. Similar efforts are unfolding throughout communities across the city, as residents band together out of necessity, demonstrating remarkable resilience and humanity, despite extreme adversity. Nationally, the news remains deeply troubling. Shortwave transmissions we recently received confirm the continued deterioration in Chicago, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C., among other major cities. In Chicago, hospitals and emergency responders report critical shortages of medical supplies, fuel, food, and clean water. Police and National Guard units continue facing immense challenges maintaining public order, with isolated incidents of unrest escalating due to desperation, confusion, and lack of clear communication. Hospitals in cities like Los Angeles, Houston, and Miami face comparable dire scenarios, urgently requesting any assistance that community organizations and volunteer groups can provide. From Washington, D.C., shortwave radio transmissions from the Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center confirm the federal government's continuity operations remain active, though severely constrained. Officials openly acknowledge the federal response remains critically limited by communications failures and infrastructure collapse, urging citizens nationwide to rely heavily on local community groups and neighborhood resources for immediate relief and safety. They continue emphasizing the importance of remaining calm, working together, and conserving critical resources wherever possible. Reports arriving from airports across the nation remain grim. At Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, thousands of travelers remain stranded with little food, water, sanitation, or basic medical care available. Similar desperate conditions persist at Dallas-Fort Worth, Denver, Miami, and Los Angeles airports, where limited resources and prolonged isolation have led to escalating tension and humanitarian crises among passengers and staff. Airport authorities have transmitted desperate shortwave appeals for external assistance, but realistic expectations of coordinated responses remain uncertain. Internationally, the situation continues, deteriorating significantly. Europe remains gripped by widespread devastation. Cities like London, Paris, Rome, Madrid, and Berlin have become scenes of large-scale urban disaster, with fires devastating residential neighborhoods and historic districts. Hospitals and emergency facilities face overwhelming shortages of critical resources, with medical professionals forced into impossible decisions as they attempt to provide care without electricity, clean water, or adequate supplies. Government responses throughout Europe remain severely hindered, with transmissions from amateur shortwave operators indicating millions remain stranded, isolated, and increasingly desperate for support. From Asia, transmissions convey catastrophic humanitarian conditions. Tokyo, Osaka, Seoul, Mumbai, Shanghai, and Hong Kong have experienced massive fires, infrastructure collapse, and widespread displacement of populations fleeing into surrounding rural areas seeking safety. Shortwave messages from these regions describe overwhelming shortages of food, water, medical supplies, and adequate shelter. Hospitals remain critically overwhelmed, medical teams operating without power or essential resources, facing unprecedented humanitarian crises on a scale that defies comprehension. Authorities from Japan, South Korea, and India have attempted urgent international appeals for assistance, but logistical challenges created by this global catastrophe severely limit potential responses. Closer to home, Canadian cities including Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, and Ottawa face similar catastrophic breakdowns. Power grids remain extensively damaged, emergency services overwhelmed, and medical facilities critically short of supplies. Reports from Mexico City and major Mexican urban areas describe comparable situations, with power failures sparking widespread civil unrest and severe humanitarian challenges. Military units throughout Mexico have been mobilized to provide basic order and essential assistance to isolated communities, though their own capacity remains limited. At our own station here at WNYC Radio New York, our broadcasting capability now approaches its final stages. Our fuel reserves for emergency generators have nearly run out, and we realistically anticipate that our transmissions will cease shortly. Engineers and staff have worked tirelessly tonight, under extreme conditions, to extend our broadcast as long as possible. Despite these efforts, we understand we soon must face silence, at least temporarily. Before that happens, I want to express my deepest gratitude and admiration for everyone who has supported this broadcast throughout the night. Our dedicated engineers, technical team, producers, and researchers, as well as listeners who have remained steadfastly with us during these challenging hours. This experience has been profoundly difficult and deeply emotional for all of us, yet your commitment, resilience, and courage have inspired our continued efforts. As we prepare for the likely suspension of our broadcasts, I urge listeners to remain hopeful and resilient. Maintain your emergency supplies carefully. Continue supporting neighbors, especially those vulnerable or isolated, and stay calm amid this extraordinary crisis. Our collective humanity, compassion, and mutual support remain critical as we navigate the uncertain days ahead. Even as the lights have gone out, communications falter, and the comforts we once took for granted become uncertain. Our greatest strength lies in our communities, families, and the basic kindness we show one another. These bonds will help us endure whatever difficulties may follow. I will remain with you here at WNYC Radio as long as physically possible. Please continue monitoring any remaining emergency broadcasts, amateur shortwave transmissions, or other available communication channels for updated information after we sign off. It's now 2:26 a.m., August 20th. Our broadcast tonight remains one of the few links available to provide accurate information, but I must once again emphasize that our station's capacity is critically limited. Our generator fuel is nearly exhausted, and we anticipate that within a short time, WNYC will be forced to cease broadcasting. Until that moment comes, I will continue to share updates, information, and messages of support for all those who remain connected to our signal. The conditions in New York City have continued to worsen significantly. Fires throughout Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx remain uncontrolled, despite extraordinary efforts by emergency services and volunteer groups. Reports transmitted via amateur shortwave radios from Brooklyn neighborhoods like Williamsburg and Bed-Stuy indicate that large residential fires have displaced thousands, many of whom are now gathered in parks, schools, and open areas, attempting to construct shelters and provide basic first aid using limited available resources. Similar scenes are unfolding in Queens neighborhoods, including Astoria, Elmhurst, and Jackson Heights, where volunteer groups describe an urgent need for water, medical supplies, food, and assistance. From Lower Manhattan, reports indicate severe fires affecting the Financial District, Battery Park City, and surrounding neighborhoods. Emergency responders, limited by failing communications and blocked roads, have struggled to evacuate residents or provide adequate assistance. Volunteer teams at South Street Seaport and Battery Park have set up makeshift emergency shelters and aid stations, desperately calling for medical assistance, fuel for emergency generators, and fresh drinking water. Hospitals in Manhattan, including Bellevue, Mount Sinai, and New York Presbyterian, face overwhelming challenges, having exhausted backup generator fuel supplies. Medical teams there have continued tirelessly, providing emergency care with limited resources, flashlights, and manual equipment. Their situation remains profoundly critical. Outside the city, reports relayed via amateur shortwave transmissions from surrounding communities such as Yonkers, White Plains, Long Island, and Newark reflect similar emergencies. These areas have experienced widespread power outages, significant infrastructure failures, and limited access to supplies or external aid. Community organizations and neighborhood volunteers in these towns report critical shortages of food, water, medical resources, and fuel. Isolated communities are increasingly relying on mutual support, organizing local aid efforts to assist neighbors in desperate need. Nationally, major urban centers continue to face devastating scenarios. Brief shortwave transmissions received recently from Chicago detail widespread civil unrest, severe medical crises, and critical shortages of basic supplies citywide. Hospitals there remain unable to adequately respond, forcing medical teams into heartbreaking decisions. Similar accounts arrive from Philadelphia, Detroit, Boston, Los Angeles, and Miami, with each city experiencing intense strain on emergency response systems, medical facilities, law enforcement, and infrastructure. Authorities in these cities urge community groups, neighborhoods, and individuals to band together in mutual support, as coordinated government responses remain severely hampered by communication failures and overwhelming demand. From Washington, D.C., transmissions indicate federal continuity operations remain active, although they acknowledge critical limitations in their capacity to deliver direct assistance. Messages relayed from Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center and Raven Rock stress that local communities and individuals must focus on immediate, neighborhood-level efforts to maintain safety and conserve essential resources. Military installations nationwide have activated emergency protocols to provide limited support where possible, although their own capabilities remain constrained due to communication outages and infrastructure failures. Reports from airports nationwide continue to describe desperate conditions for thousands of stranded travelers. At Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson, Dallas-Fort Worth, Denver International, and Los Angeles airports, emergency conditions persist, with passengers facing severe shortages of water, food, sanitation, and medical care. Airport personnel have broadcast repeated shortwave requests for external assistance, yet realistic expectations of timely relief remain limited given the broader infrastructure collapse. Passengers and airport staff alike have increasingly relied on internal cooperation and mutual support for basic survival. Internationally, conditions remain catastrophic. European cities like London, Paris, Berlin, Madrid, and Rome face ongoing humanitarian crises, with uncontrolled fires and exhausted emergency resources. Shortwave operators in Europe describe significant displacement of populations, severe shortages of essential supplies, and limited governmental coordination. Rural areas have become overwhelmed with residents fleeing urban centers, causing additional strain on already limited local resources. Hospitals throughout Europe face critical shortages of medicines, equipment, and power, forcing medical staff into unimaginable circumstances of care and decision-making. Across Asia, reports transmitted via amateur shortwave operators describe widespread devastation in major cities. Tokyo, Osaka, Seoul, Mumbai, and Hong Kong have seen massive fires, collapsed infrastructure, and overwhelming humanitarian crises, leaving millions displaced and without essential services. Hospitals there remain critically overwhelmed, without power, medical supplies, water, or coordinated support. Authorities from Japan, South Korea, and India have attempted desperate appeals for international humanitarian aid, but logistical limitations due to global infrastructure collapse have severely constrained relief efforts. Canadian cities such as Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, and Ottawa have transmitted similar reports, facing widespread power outages, emergency response challenges, and critical resource shortages. Mexican cities, including Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey, similarly struggle to maintain basic services, prompting military and government responses to stabilize conditions amid growing humanitarian needs. Here at WNYC Radio, the moment we have long anticipated now approaches rapidly. Our emergency generators are nearing complete depletion of fuel, and our broadcast will soon cease. My team and I have worked tirelessly throughout the night to provide accurate, reliable information and to offer support to those listening. Although this will be one of my final messages until our broadcast resumes, I want to thank each listener who has stayed with us, each volunteer who has provided essential updates via shortwave radio, and each community member who has offered aid and compassion during these challenging hours. As we approach the silence of this station, remember the strength we have witnessed tonight. Neighbors assisting neighbors, communities forming mutual aid groups, ordinary citizens becoming heroes in extraordinary circumstances. Even as our technology has failed us, our human bonds have strengthened. Let this remind us all of our capacity for resilience, cooperation, and compassion as we face the unknown days ahead. Please continue monitoring available shortwave transmissions, amateur radio operators, and remaining emergency broadcast channels for updated information. Conserve your resources carefully, continue to offer assistance where safe and possible, and remain hopeful. Our collective humanity remains our most powerful resource in this unprecedented global crisis. This is Andrea Mitchell with WNYC Radio New York. It is now 3:18 a.m., August 20th, and I believe this will be our final transmission. Our emergency generators are nearly dry, and the power to keep this broadcast alive will soon vanish. We have done everything possible to stretch the little fuel we had, but there are no more options left. I want to use these last moments to give you what updates we can, to provide guidance, and, most importantly, to leave you with a message of hope. First, the situation in New York City. Fires continue to burn through multiple boroughs. From our windows in Lower Manhattan, we see flames rising across the skyline, patches of light flickering in the distance where buildings once stood secure. Reports relayed from volunteer networks indicate that large portions of Brooklyn and Queens are no longer accessible due to collapsed infrastructure, blocked roads, and growing structural instability. Entire neighborhoods, particularly in the Bronx and southern Brooklyn, are facing extreme danger as fires overwhelm exhausted community volunteers and remaining emergency responders. In Manhattan, volunteer aid stations have been set up at Battery Park, Union Square, and Central Park. These gathering points are now vital lifelines for anyone displaced or in need of basic support. Volunteers there are organizing water distribution, first aid, and the creation of makeshift shelters using whatever materials are available. They report shortages of food, medicine, and especially clean drinking water. I cannot stress enough. If you are near any of these points and need assistance, go cautiously, preferably with neighbors or family, and stay together. Hospitals have become places of overwhelming need and heartbreaking decisions. Bellevue, Mount Sinai, New York Presbyterian, and others across the city have nearly exhausted all remaining fuel for backup generators. Staff continue to work tirelessly under conditions I can barely describe. They are operating with flashlights and headlamps, manually ventilating patients when machines fail, improvising treatments with what little remains in their dwindling supply closets. Messages from these facilities plead for volunteers with any medical training to assist, but they are also warning that they cannot guarantee safety or even basic security. Our latest updates from surrounding communities paint a similarly grim picture. Yonkers, White Plains, Newark, and Jersey City all face prolonged blackouts. Shortwave operators report fires spreading unchecked in Newark's Ironbound district, where volunteer groups are attempting to contain them with little success. Out on Long Island, local community centers have opened as shelters, but capacity is limited, and supplies are running low. It's clear now that these crises are not isolated. They stretch far beyond our city limits. Across the nation, the same stories repeat. Chicago remains under immense strain as volunteers and overstretched National Guard units attempt to restore a semblance of order. Hospitals there are overwhelmed, and some neighborhoods are effectively isolated. Philadelphia, Boston, Baltimore, Detroit, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Miami are all reporting near-total communication failure, infrastructure collapse, and rising desperation. Authorities are urging citizens to organize at the neighborhood level, to share resources, and to assist the vulnerable. From Washington, D.C., the Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center transmitted what may be one of its final national messages. Federal continuity operations remain active, but they acknowledge that organized relief on a large scale will take time. Communities are asked to prepare for extended isolation, potentially weeks, before substantial aid can reach every area. Citizens are being urged to pool supplies, safeguard water sources, and build safe local networks for survival. Airports nationwide remain in crisis. Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson, Los Angeles International, Dallas-Fort Worth, and Denver International have all become improvised refugee centers. Thousands are still stranded in terminals with limited food and water. Airport personnel, supported by small numbers of National Guard troops, are doing everything they can to maintain order and distribute remaining resources, but conditions remain tense and precarious. Internationally, the scale of devastation is staggering. In Europe, major cities like London, Paris, Berlin, Rome, and Madrid are engulfed in large-scale fires, infrastructure breakdowns, and mass displacement. We are hearing reports of people evacuating on foot into the countryside, seeking communities that might be better prepared to sustain themselves in the days and weeks ahead. Hospitals throughout the continent are collapsing under the strain, and governments, though still functioning in fortified facilities, are struggling to communicate with one another. From Asia, shortwave operators continue to relay messages describing catastrophic conditions. Tokyo and Osaka have been devastated by widespread fires and food shortages. Seoul, Shanghai, Mumbai, and Hong Kong face equally severe crises, with millions of residents now living without access to clean water or reliable food sources. Hospitals in these cities are unable to cope, and rural areas are struggling to absorb the sudden influx of displaced populations. International appeals for assistance have been made, but coordinated relief efforts are paralyzed by the global nature of this disaster. Canada and Mexico face similar challenges. Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey have all reported the same pattern: collapsed infrastructure, fires, shortages, and severely limited government capacity to respond. Local communities have become the only safety net available, with citizens banding together to share what they have and keep one another alive. To those listening now, I want to speak plainly. We are entering an uncertain period, one where technology, comfort, and the systems we relied upon are no longer guaranteed. In the days ahead, your survival and well-being will depend heavily on your ability to organize with those around you. Share resources, protect clean water sources, prepare food carefully and sparingly. Check on your neighbors, especially the elderly, the sick, and the young. Build trust, because it will be the foundation for enduring the challenges to come. I also want to leave you with a message of hope. Even tonight, amid the darkness, I have seen extraordinary acts of kindness and resilience. Volunteers risking their lives to help strangers. Neighbors opening their homes and sharing what little they have. Parents comforting their children and holding families together. These are the actions that will carry us through. We cannot control the scale of this disaster, but we can choose how we treat one another as we face it. As our signal prepares to fade, I urge you to keep listening to any remaining shortwave transmissions or emergency broadcasts. Amateur radio operators across the country are working around the clock to share information and connect communities. If you have access to a radio, stay tuned to established frequencies and maintain a schedule for listening, even if transmissions seem intermittent. Our generators are now seconds away from failure. I can hear the hum of the equipment faltering behind me. To everyone who has stayed with us through the night, on behalf of the entire WNYC team, thank you. It has been an honor to be your voice in the darkness, even as we too have struggled with fear and uncertainty. Please stay strong. Please stay kind. The world has changed forever tonight, but humanity has not. We endure by standing together, by building communities in the face of adversity, and by refusing to let despair erase compassion.